Fox News alert, President Trump firming back at MSNBC after releasing a portion of his tax returns, calling the network, quote, fake news. But the much-hyped doc released may actually be good news for Mr. Trump. This is Outnumbered. I'm Meghan McCain. Here today, Sandra Smith, the Fox Business Network's Elizabeth McDonald, Fox News legal and political analyst Ebony Williams, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, the CEO of CrowdPack and the former chief strategist for British Prime Minister David Cameron, Steve Hilton, who is also the new host of the newly minted Fox News Channel show, The Next Revolution with Steve Hilton. Congratulations. Awesome. We're going to talk more about that later. But first, we remind you you're outnumbered.
and I always love it.
It is so good to see you, and we're glad you made it in, by the way.
Yeah, it was tough. I made it through the weather, and it's good to be here in a very warm environment.
Yes, and congratulations all around.
Thank you.
All right, let's begin. The White House calling the move desperate and totally illegal. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow last night releasing with much fanfare 2 pages of President Trump's 2005 tax returns, which were obtained by a reporter for the website dcreport.org. The documents revealing that the president paid roughly a 25% tax rate on about $153 million in income. President Trump hitting back this morning, tweeting, "Does anybody really believe that a reporter who nobody ever heard of went to his mailbox and found my tax returns? NBC News, fake news." Chief correspondent John Roberts joins us live.
Megan,
Hi, John.
good afternoon. Hey, Megan, good afternoon. I'm not quite sure what the tweet refers to in terms of does anybody believe that he went to his mailbox and found the tax returns, because it seems that's exactly what happened. And the fact that it's fake news doesn't seem to have any relevance to the fact that the White House was very quick to confirm last night that, yes, the president did pay about $38 million of tax on $153 million in income. This is actually, and you mentioned this at the top, Megan, a pretty good story for this White House, but the White House is professing outrage over it. The White House in a statement saying, quote, "You know you're desperate for ratings when you're willing to violate the law to push a story about 2 pages of tax returns from over a decade ago. Before being elected president, Mr. Trump was one of the most successful businessmen in the world, with a responsibility to his company, his family, and his employees to pay no more tax than legally required." You mentioned his effective tax rate. Let's put up a little page of comparison here so you can see what he did compared to other people. His tax rate was about 25.3% in 2005. That compares to President Obama's tax rate in 2015 of 18.7%. Bernie Sanders' 13.5% tax rate in 2014, and Mitt Romney, who paid 14.1% in 2011. The comparative numbers prompted a cheeky response from Kentucky Senator Rand Paul this morning, who suggested, well, maybe Bernie Sanders might want to take note of that. Listen.
Since Senator Sanders is such a good socialist, I think he'd want to pay his fair share. I'm expecting news any day that he's going to send a couple $100,000 into the IRS so he can pay his fair share.
The president did take some big deductions, though, back in 2005. He had $105 million of business losses, and the Wall Street Journal had reported earlier that he was eligible for a nearly $40 million charitable deduction. That was in the form of a conservation easement for promising that he would not develop the Bedminster, New Jersey golf course into anything other than a golf course, which, of course, is completely allowable by the IRS. The IRS would take 3 years to look at that, and if they didn't argue with it, then he'd be able to keep that. So that could be part of the deductions as well. Absolutely no suggestion in here at all, Megan, of anything improper being done. And again, it seems to paint the president in a pretty favorable light, particularly when you look at those comparative numbers. Megan?
Thank you so much, John. Okay, I want to start with you, Steve Hilton. Big breaking news last night. Donald Trump is a wealthy man who paid his fair share in taxes.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? But there's this old sort of posh British saying that people use. It relates to fox hunting, and it's when something happens that undermines someone's argument. They say, "We've shot your fox." This fox was well and truly shot, because look at what they were saying about why it was so important to see Trump's tax returns. One, because it would show that he's not as rich as he likes to think, that he doesn't pay as many taxes, that he's got something dodgy going on with Russia. Every single one of those things was shown not to be true. And so just on the surface, in terms of an immediate story, obviously it's good for the president and not good for his critics. But I think the really important thing that underlies all this is that, they're not going to stop with this. They're going to keep going. They're going to keep going because it's all they've got. It's all to do with the fundamental point that they don't think that he was legitimately elected. They can't believe that he won the election. They hate the fact that he's in the White House, and they want to do anything to try and undermine him. And that's why they're going for the tax returns, because they hope that in there somewhere is something to give some kind of credence to this crazy conspiracy theory about Russia colluding with the Trump campaign.
I want to just clear up some of the legal stuff. To that point, they teach us something our first year in law school, Megan. You never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. And I think that's why I hear you saying, Steve, the kind of media was pushing this narrative of he's not as rich as he says he is. He's not paying any taxes at all. They didn't really know the true answer. And now I think they're kind of probably pretty regretful. But here it is, this notion of Rachel Maddow violating the law in what she did. So this is interesting. There is actual federal code, 26 U.S. Code 6103, that says it is a felony if someone releases tax returns if they're not authorized. But it's because that person is an official of the government. So if the IRS employee or somebody like that releases it. Rachel Maddow does have some protection around First Amendment rights. It's kind of muddy, but the Supreme Court has spoken on it. So I just kind of want to put that out there for people to chew on.
So it's a person who got the return and released it to Rachel Maddow.
They committed a felony.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
You know what's interesting here, guys, is that, you know, Donald Trump's effective tax rate, 25%, I think, is even higher than Comcast's effective tax rates, which owns, runs NBC. And, let's just back up. Should he release his tax returns? I mean, Nixon released it when he was under audit. That's, I think, part of the debate, too. But, you know, what it also zooms in, as Rand Paul was pointing out, is Bernie Sanders' effective rate is so low because Bernie Sanders takes advantage of a lot of deductions that Bernie Sanders himself wants to cap for the upper brackets. So he doesn't practice what he preaches, right, in his own tax returns.
We've also seen the left reluctant to choose their battles. They've basically been attacking this president on everything. I wonder if does this put the tax issue to rest, or will they continue to go after him and want to see more of his tax?
I don't think it will. They're going to keep going. It's like I was saying, and to me, there's something really decadent about that. And what I mean by that word is that right now in America, you've got a really big crisis. You've got an economic crisis right across the country, not in Washington, D.C. and amongst the media establishment and the political establishment, but you've got people who are desperate for a pay rise, desperate for a job. You've got a social crisis, the opioid epidemic, such big problems. And it seems to me really decadent that the establishment in D.C. and the media establishment are just obsessed with sort of chit-chat around this kind of stuff when there's such big problems to solve.
That's a great point.
I want to go to this tweet from Hillary Clinton's spokesman, Brian Fallon. He said, Dems should return focus to Trump Care tomorrow and the millions it will leave uninsured, not get distracted by 2 pages from a 2005 tax return. Whomever leaked this to Rachel Maddow and got her to bait and switch and be, in her own words, flustered before the show is absolutely brilliant, because this, I think, will go down as one of the Geraldo Rivera, Al Capone in the vault moments. It was absolutely ridiculous. I have to say, I fell for this hook, line, and sinker. I was ready, set to watch The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, clicked over to MSNBC, watched it instead, and she really teed it up like Russian oligarchs, connections to Russia.
Okay, so let me take it from there, because we are going to talk about the outrage from the left and the right over the way in which she approached this at the top of her show last night. But there was that moment where she did try to tie this to Russia, as if she was trying to make something out of these taxes. And she talked about that $40 million property that Trump bought down in Palm Beach, sold it for $100 million to a Russian oligarch, as if that's supposed to, by some means, be bad by nature.
Yachts had been in the same place, in the same marina.
That narrative is out there, right, about Russia. So it's already out there. They're trying to, tag the president with that. I don't know how you get more information out of a 2-page tax return, right? And it took an hour and a half for the reveal to happen, right?
A lot of build-up, and I think a lot of disappointment. Here's the thing where I think many are kind of on the left get this narrative wrong, though. My mother voted for Trump. You know why? Because she says, I don't want to pay this many taxes either. So I think, seriously, I really think a lot of people on the left, on the right, in the middle even are saying, you know what, there's a lot of issues I might have with Donald Trump. This tax one isn't one of them, because quite frankly, if he's smart enough to figure out a legal and legitimate way to minimize what you're giving the government, who's not being a good steward anyway of our money, my goodness, I want in.
By the way, most of this was in the form of the alternative minimum tax, something he's trying to get rid of himself.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. Don't worry. We are going to have much more on this story, because I still have more to say. What it all says about the liberal media, and if Rachel Maddow will face any backlash for overhyping the story that a Washington Post reporter called a, quote, nothing burger. Ouch. And lawmakers on both sides of the aisle running out of patience. They want to see evidence if indeed President Obama ordered surveillance on President Trump. The White House saying it will be vindicated. And after the show, you can join our live chat by clicking the Overtime tab, foxnews.com/outnumbered, or go to facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. And of course, you can tweet us anytime, anywhere. See you there.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle demanding evidence of President Trump's claim that President Obama ordered surveillance on him during the 2016 presidential campaign. The Republican chairman and ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee giving a status update on their investigation just moments ago. Watch.
To date, I've seen no evidence that supports the claim that President Trump made that his predecessor had wiretapped he and his associates at Trump Tower. It deeply concerns me that the president would make such an accusation without basis.
All right. They also confirmed that FBI Director James Comey, as expected, will testify at Monday's hearing on Russia. Meantime, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer saying President Trump is confident the investigation will vindicate him. Watch.
How confident is President Trump that any evidence will arise to support his claim?
I think he's extremely confident. I've mentioned this before. I'll let them do their job. I'll let the House and Senate, and I'll let the DOJ report this. But as I've commented in the past, I think there's significant reporting about surveillance techniques that have existed throughout the 2016 election. I'll leave it to them to issue their report. But I think he feels very confident that what will ultimately come of this will vindicate him.
Meanwhile, Senators Lindsey Graham and Sheldon Whitehouse of the Judiciary Committee have asked FBI Director Comey for evidence supporting the White House's wiretap claim. Both senators say they expect an answer from Comey as early as today. Let me go back to one of Adam Schiff's exact responses to this a few moments ago. He said the reality is I don't think they have the foggiest idea what was behind POTUS's claim. Steve?
Well, I think that the sad thing about all of this is that because of the actions of the FBI and the intelligence agencies during the Obama administration, people have just lost confidence and trust in anything that they say. So it's all very well for Clapper, for example, the other weekend to say, well, I can absolutely tell you that this is false and there was no wiretaps or anything. He's the person that went to Congress and lied directly about surveillance of
perjured himself.
The whole of the American people. And so people, and then Comey, look at the way Comey behaved in the election campaign. Yeah. People just don't believe what they're being told. And that's not because people have become, neurotic and conspiracy theorists. It's because of the behavior of those people in power themselves. And so I just don't, and when people say all those cliches about that, we got to get to the bottom of this, got to clear it up, I just think that we'll never do that until we get a real grip, until the president gets a real grip of these intelligence agencies and the government and actually puts them on a much less politicized footing.
Yeah, well, it's tough because the argument is that the president could call the DOJ and the FBI saying, give me the information, was I wiretapped? But then, there is that report out there, reports that there was surveillance of the Russian computers, talking to Trump Tower computers, worries about Russian officials influencing the election via money, and did it get bigger with wiretaps? No evidence of wiretaps, but now we have Senator Chuck Grassley saying, I'm going to wait and sit on the nomination of the Deputy Attorney General until we get a briefing from James Comey.
Yeah, I worry about the levels of politicization this is going to get to. And as you said, with this specific issue, I think it's very difficult for people to delineate between what is political and what is actually the truth. Sean Spicer says he's extremely confident that the White House does have proof. As I said earlier on the week, I think sunshine's the best disinfectant, and I would love to see what proof they have to offer. The problem is, as you noted earlier, there's reason to believe that these intelligence agencies would do things specifically for political purpose because many of them feel defensive and territorial over the Obama legacy and the president that brought them into their original job. So I think we're beating a dead horse, and I think this is going to become one of those.
But the next piece of news to come out of this is FBI Director James Comey is expected to react to Senator Graham and Senator Whitehouse's questions about this, about evidence supporting the White House's wiretap claims. Sure. They are suggesting that they could hear back from Comey by end of day.
By end of day. Look, I said it last week. I'll say it again. Mr. President, I will hear your argument. Show me the receipts. I think that is a very simple and reasonable expectation at this point. And I believe when Sean Spicer talks about the White House and the president being vindicated, I think he's acknowledging a truth, and maybe an uncomfortable truth for some Trump supporters, that President Trump's credibility is a bit on the line with this accusation. And I think that's a fair analysis. And so it's really an opportunity to rehabilitate that credibility accountability in a very clear and plain way for everyone.
There was a conversation that took place at that press briefing just a few moments ago with Schiff, and there was talk about whether he meant this literally with the tweets about wiretapping or not, going back to our discussion yesterday about the fact that it was in quotation.
Or he meant it was to mean surveillance, right? Because the NSA apparently does not need to wiretap. It can surveil smartphones, right?
But then you see, if that's true, I mean, look, you had loads of reports from the New York Times and others that literally used the word wiretap to say that it was going on. I mean, the whole thing is such a mess. I think you're exactly right, Megan. You know, however much people say, let's get to the bottom of it, I don't think that's going to happen.
I agree.
And it will leave people in the end, if you're a Trump supporter, you'll say you've got this deep state against him, you've got the establishment against him, they don't like him, they want to get him out and so on. And if you hate Trump, like the establishment do, then you'll think that he's a fantasist. And whatever these people say is not going to clear that up.
Credibility by the State Department
or Comey, especially Comey.
Right, or the DOJ.
I mean, who trusts Comey on anything?
On either side.
No one.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is why he should have stepped down.
Well, we'll be hearing from possibly today and as well as Monday. All right, House Speaker Paul Ryan now says he's willing to negotiate amid growing criticism from many in his own party over the Republicans' health care overhaul. Democrats also say they're ready to come to the table, but only if Republicans give up on repealing Obamacare. What's next in this fight? Plus, we're just hours away now from President Trump's revised travel ban going into effect, but critics making a final effort right now to stop it in court. Will they succeed? The GOP and the White House stepping up efforts to move health care legislation forward amid intense criticism from conservative lawmakers over the current plan. But House Speaker Paul Ryan telling Fox he's confident there's room for compromise. Watch.
The Budget Committee takes this up on Thursday, so those discussions about what kind of modifications, those are ongoing discussions.
So you are open to changes?
Of course we are.
Meantime, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer pushing for a public option, but says Democrats are also willing to compromise if the GOP stands down on scrapping Obamacare. Watch this.
If Senator McConnell, Speaker Ryan, and President Trump say tomorrow they're giving up on repeal, we'll work with them to improve ACA.
So let's get first to Paul Ryan. Well, okay, wait. What got you there, Steve?
I'm sorry. I know this is not at the level of political analysis people have come to expect on this show, but what about when I watched that, like, his eyes, they're like something like this.
Oh, I think that's
they had this sort of blue, there's something really weird going on, like Blue Laser Man. I don't know. It was a little disturbing. Sorry.
I like that.
He's been very busy, hasn't he? We've heard a lot from him lately. But let's go back to Paul Ryan, and we just heard from him on with Martha last night, saying that there's room for compromise with conservatives.
Wait, can I jump on this really quickly, not to interrupt you, Steve, because I just can't handle this when I saw the clip. He's been going on TV saying this is a binary choice. You are either with Nancy Pelosi or you're with the Republicans on this repeal and replace. The end. Everyone that is in the Freedom Caucus needs to get in line. This is a big tent party. What changed last night? Because that little clip is very significant.
You know, where's the compromise? Because the big issue, it seems, is we have to take care of the poor. And Paul Ryan has been about those those Medicaid block grants to the states. Let the states handle that issue. I'll tell you, the GOP cannot fall down on this. They have to come out saying, yes, we are going to take care of the poor. But can I just make one point that the CBO scoring, they're saying 24 million people will not have insurance within 10 years. That's about the same number of people the CBO said were going to be in the Obamacare exchanges. And it's less than half of that.
But they don't have a clue. I mean, they're sort of budget number people, and they can't predict how people would respond years down the line to a changing market. But I think that the underlying point here is actually not about healthcare. It's actually deeper than that. It's about how Congress works and the fact that it doesn't work. And I think the problem is that if you look at the sort of detail of this, there's a whole bunch of things that Paul Ryan is saying will happen in the future that may actually get some of those Freedom Caucus people on board and actually genuinely create some kind of consensus. But he's saying we can't do that in this bill because we can do it by regulation, and then we need other legislation, and that's all to do with blah blah blah. All this kind of in the weeds, the process of Congress.
Right.
That is what's driving this into the ditch. And actually, what everyone knows that Washington isn't working. The president was elected in order to make it work. So I think the most important thing that needs to happen is for someone to say to them, forget about your stupid rules and your processes. It's not working for the American people. You actually need to make this all happen quickly.
But present a concise bill. We've had 6 years to do this. Just start with the bill you want. How about that? What about the one you put on President Obama's desk in 2009? I think Paul Ryan understands that there's blood in the water, and if this doesn't work, President Trump's head's not going to roll. It's his.
You know, Ebony, there's a big problem. I'm sorry because this is upsetting. Obamacare did have in it health compacts saying to the states, you can sell insurance across state lines. 5 states did it. But, you know, the insurance industry does have such a lock on state capitals that it's really hard to do that,
Yeah,
right?
and that's what we talked about a little bit last week. The lobbying behind those insurance companies are so strong, so overwhelming. I think that's why we're not seeing that being taken advantage of, Liz. That's an excellent point. Here's the problem with what Chuck Schumer proposes. It's a non-negotiable. You're saying we will come to the table and negotiate on the one non-negotiable, which is the actual repeal, the political promise that this whole thing is predicated on. So that's a problem there. Ultimately, you talked about this, Megan, and you're right. The narrative around healthcare has changed per Obamacare. And so the one thing Obamacare proponents can, I think, rightfully talk about is more people have coverage right now. But how do you keep the, quote, more covered with reducing the premiums, making it more affordable, and improving health care?
Well, their answer to that is their answer is competition, is actually market competition.
Free market.
Get rid of the regulations that force people to have these premiums that they don't need and allow the competition in the insurance industry. That's their answer, but it's not in the bill.
Fingers crossed, to Liz's point, insurance companies will let off that and really allow that competition to take place.
And it's an integral conservative ideology that should be in this bill. We've promised this for the past 6 years, and the fact that it isn't included is why a lot of people, myself included, are so disappointed.
Suspicious that it's not there. President Trump's second attempt at a temporary travel ban that does target majority Muslim countries goes into effect tonight at midnight, unless, of course, like the first one, a judge blocks it. As we reported yesterday, 7 states across the nation are suing to stop the revised executive order. Hearings are taking place today in 2 federal courts, one in Maryland and the other in Hawaii. Steve, so this is what we know. This ban is a bit different than the first ban. A couple things are different. People with visas are permitted to come in and out, take one country off, things of this nature. Does this make it better or more likely to succeed in your view?
Well, look, I think there's a legal answer to that, which is that my sort of non-expert interpretation of the first thing was that actually the grounds for objecting were not particularly strong legally; that they just got the process wrong. I think that the Constitution and previous law gives the president a lot of discretion on immigration, and I don't think that's changed. I think it's helpful that they've got rid. It looks like they've got rid of some of the things that cause people to be really upset, the green card holders and so on. The interpreters in Iraq particularly got a lot of people anxious and upset. So I think if those things are dealt with, that helps politically. But I think the fundamental point here to me is like the real need here is what he promised in the campaign, which is extreme vetting, not just for people from these countries, but for everyone. And it feels like so much time has gone by. Why don't we just go straight to the extreme vetting and not worry about it?
To that point, Liz, this does feel like it's more of a vocal focus on national security, and that was originally the point. Seems like there's been a return to that narrative. Do you think that helps? The Trump supporters we know are on board, but those that are concerned and that were alarmed even at the first ban, does this ban feel better for them? Do you think?
Personally, I think it should feel better for them because this is about region, not religion, as Muslim reformers have repeatedly told us on camera. And to Steve's point, I think it's important. And the extreme vetting has to go to extreme vetting of ideology, and that you do not support Sharia law. You will not try to impose Sharia law in this country. It's unacceptable to our values of tolerance, and it's totally inimical to our Constitution and Bill of Rights.
What's interesting also is the rollout is going to look and feel so much different than the first time around, right? I mean, we won't see the types of delays and the chaos as it was described and put on headlines all over the world. That's certainly going to feel a lot different. Will that have any effect on the way this is perceived?
Well, I think to a certain extent the heat has gone out of it, because that was a very hot time indeed, and actually so many other things have now happened since. So I think that's a really good point. I don't think it's going to be the same kind of feeling, but I don't know. I mean, I think if I'm right, what was it? They wanted 90 days for the ban, whilst they put extreme vetting in place. I mean, a good chunk of that time has now been used up. So, I mean, I think that's the fundamental point, is that we need better security and vetting of everyone. And this travel order was always temporary anyway.
Sure, and I want to talk about, and I do want to get to you, Megan, 1 second, that Hawaii's argument is a bit different. So in some of the initial lawsuits, there was a question really in the legal community around standing. Do just the states have legal standing around this? So Hawaii, in an effort to get in front of this, they have a real plaintiff this time. And this is a doctor, a Muslim doctor, who's saying that his Syrian mother-in-law will not be permitted to visit. So it'll be interesting to see what Hawaii does there. But go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, because Hawaii's big argument right now is that it still is religious discrimination. And we had a conversation last week on the couch about intent coming into play when it comes to legal cases, meaning the, quote, Muslim ban from the campaign trail, words from Mayor Giuliani and Donald Trump himself could actually come back to bite him. Do you think that will happen in the case in Hawaii as well?
I expect so, Megan. Yes, I expect those lawyers for the state of Hawaii to make that argument, because it's probably going to be they've got a strong counter argument, which is national security. So you've got to balance something with national security. I think the closest they're going to get is this First Amendment kind of establishment clause,
due process,
all of these things. That's going to be their best chance, and they still ultimately might come up short.
Major backlash over Rachel Maddow's alleged scoop on President Trump's tax returns. Both liberals and conservatives are accusing the MSNBC host of overhyping what she had and playing viewers for ratings. Before her show, she tweeted, "Breaking! We've got Trump's tax returns tonight, 9 p.m. MSNBC, seriously." And then clarifying a bit, what we've got is from 2005, the president's 1040 form, details to come tonight, 9 p.m. MSNBC. The network even making a countdown clock ticking off the seconds to her show, but when 9 p.m. Eastern rolled around, this happened.
Without further ado, I pass the baton to my friend and colleague, Rachel Maddow. Your show starts now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. It's been a little bit of a hullabaloo around here this evening. I apologize for being a little flustered.
People literally were tweeting at me, "Shut up, get to Rachel."
Well, you can't before 9 o'clock because I'm not sitting here
I wanted to respond.
until 8:59:58.
I'm going to go watch.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. And thanks to you at home for joining us for the next hour. You may have heard, we've got some significant breaking news tonight. Donald Trump's tax returns.
Breathe. Oh my gosh. Okay, it took her about 20 minutes to even get to her story. And then when her show ended, MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell invited Maddow over to his set to keep on talking, but not before gushing to her about her reporting.
You know, normally at 9 p.m., I have some stuff to do to prepare for a 10 p.m. live TV show. All that stuff I made sure was done at 8:59 p.m. I got to watch every minute tonight. This has been riveting television. This has been an amazing revelation.
Okay, viewers were not impressed. Some tweets saying, quote, "odd and blatantly vague," phrasing for Rachel Maddow to hitch her wagon to last night. She's now nothing more than a girl that cried wolf. Rachel Maddow turned a scoop on Donald Trump's taxes into a cynical, self-defeating spectacle. She is no journalist. And Rachel Maddow looked ridiculous last night. She did Trump a major favor. He paid more taxes than Obama and even Bernie. So, I have so much to say on that. I have so much to say, but I will start with you, Steve. I mean, it's one of the more bizarre things I've ever seen on television in my entire life, and I'm 32 years old.
Funny enough, I was, battling through the elements to get here from California. I missed it. I didn't see it. That's the first time I've seen it. It is kind of excruciating, like you watch that and, well, I think that, to me, this illustrates just a bigger point here, which is that, for weeks and weeks and weeks, we've just seen this endless speculation and these conspiracy theories and trying to make something out of nothing, and it's just really. I think there's a sort of nervous breakdown going on. On the left and in the media, who are just so desperate to prove their theory that obviously it can't be as straightforward as Donald Trump won the election because people wanted change in America, that it had to be because the Russians conspired with it. And just so desperate to prove that, they go to any lengths, and it's just really embarrassing.
But Liz, she has producers, and I found out that this was actually already reported in the Wall Street Journal last year, that Donald Trump paid $38 million in taxes. So I don't know what the giant reveal was on this.
Yeah, and why was it
last night?
Quote, significant as they presented it last night? The storyline was from the Democrats that Donald Trump has paid no taxes. He has been paying taxes. Even the White House scooped Rachel Maddow because it took Rachel Maddow an hour and a half to get to the story. And CNBC, the sister network to MSNBC, said this. They put up the piece that Trump just got a nice victory, thanks of all people to Rachel Maddow. And people are tweeting out, it takes less time to fill out your taxes than it is to get to the scoop, the so-called scoop.
It really was like the way a reality show is hyped, though. It was much like the way the Bachelor finale was. It was like, we're going to have the big reveal coming up at 9 p.m. Here's the countdown clock and the most dramatic tax reveal ever. It was, I agree with you that I think the left is having some kind of maybe divorcement from reality right now.
I think the president used a very good word to describe it, desperation. I mean, it did reek of desperation. And I like you, Megan, I was a bit of a sucker and I tuned in, but even though I knew that the White House had already scooped her report on this and put the taxes out there, and I watched it, and I feel like her viewers that I kind of want an apology for wasting my time.
100%. Like I said, I missed the finale last night.
But then I quickly switched over to Tucker.
So it's like this. I think that Rachel and her producers, they forgot how important the second half is. I think they were genuinely very excited. You asked about this. It was like, what's the big deal? We got the tax return, the thing that Donald Trump never wanted us to get our hands on. I think that part was very exciting for them. The other part, what's actually on the tax return, seems to have escaped them.
It shows that he paid a higher. It shows he paid. This was missing in their reporting, and this is what happens when you stand in the amen corner talking to each other and you don't do reporting. And that's what's the problem. What's going on at MSNBC? I don't care what their ratings are. It's not fair and it's not journalism. They didn't report that Obama had a lower tax rate than Donald Trump, effectively. And Bernie Sanders lower, Mitt Romney lower, Comcast, the owner of NBC, lower. Warren Buffett all had a lower effective tax rate.
But the political implications of this is it was a very good night for Donald Trump last night. Even Donald Trump Jr. tweeted this last night. Thank you, Rachel Maddow, for proving to your Trump haters and followers how successful Donald Trump is and that he paid $40 million in taxes. And I think that was the big reveal, that he had paid his fair share in taxes.
That wasn't the reveal they were concerned with, though, Meg. They were concerned with the reveal that we got what he said we couldn't get. But they missed how important the reveal substantive reveal.
I mean, and I'm not saying that because this is not direct to you, but I understand how you miss something like that. There's a whole group of people that make a show go together at night, and if I was tweeting something as hyped as this.
We got it, y'all, we got it, finally, and no one bothered to read that $38 million
It's as
line.
stupid as my brother who sends me things online that show me that the Loch Ness Monster exists. That's how dumb I thought last night was. Okay, a case in the, no offense to my brother, a case in the courts right now that could have a big impact on hundreds of thousands of immigrants known as dreamers, and it all centers around this man, a judge's recommendation for his case and the precedent it could set for everyone else covered by the Obama administration's deferred action on deportation.
All right, well, a big test for the 800,000 so-called dreamers in the United States. It centers around the outcome of this young father's case. The Mexican-born 24-year-old was covered by DACA, or DACA, President Obama's deferred deportation policy for those brought here illegally as children. He was arrested last month by immigration officers on suspicion of having gang ties, which he denies. Now, a judge in Washington state rejecting his request for release and recommending that instead of immigration court, this case should go to federal court. A decision there could be made on whether his arrest and detention violated his constitutional rights. The judge writing about the case, quote, courts have recognized that DACA confers lawful presence, but courts have not defined the rights that flow from this lawful presence. Ebony, to you first, with our legal mind on the couch.
Thank you. Yeah, this is going to be a fantastic test case to tell us what the DACA, the deferred rights, really mean. How wide do they go? What the scope of them really entail? We know for a fact it means you can have legal presence in our country if you were born here before the age of 14 and you qualified for that. We know that much. But what we don't know, and this case will likely tell us, does that mean you get the constitutional rights of actual United States citizens? Do you have due process rights? Do you have those types of rights? And that's a huge question that in Twitter, you know, I have debates about this all the time because there's this legitimate question. Are you treated the same as a United States citizen just because you have residency rights. And so I think, Sandra, this is going to be a brilliant, very important, very critically important test case constitutionally for us to have an answer, a definitive answer around how broad that scope of rights are.
How are his rights violated if he's arrested for gang ties?
Yeah, surely it's the criminality that's the...
Yeah.
No, so here's the thing, because he was arrested under suspicion of that. I'm not really quite sure what the probable cause and all those things were. Obviously, he denies that. They talk about gang tattoos. But he was detained around immigration, because originally, remember, this originated in immigration court around an immigration hold. So that's the question. So it's how those two go together, the immigration rights versus, and that's why this was taken out of immigration courts and now put in federal, because we want to test this issue of how broad your constitutional rights really go.
Liz, what do you see happening here?
I think this is a battle royale, and I think it could be a game-changer case. There are due process rights that have already been afforded to illegals here. That's the way the courts have ruled in the past. However, I think if he is guilty of gang ties, hey, that's an issue.
But that's a separate issue, right? So I think that's right. What I want to make really clear, then that's a separate issue. Then that's a criminal issue, and certainly he'll be convicted accordingly if that's indeed the case. But that's different from his immigration status.
It's a wrong test case for that, then.
Megan?
This would be the wrong test case for that, then.
When we talk about immigration on the couch, I know better, or as good as anyone who grew up in a border state, that there are many tentacles when it comes to immigration. It's not just as cut and dry as we're not going to let illegal immigrants into the country without recourse. Dreamers, in particular, is a really big issue, and it's obviously children that were brought here, I believe under the age of 10, into the United States of America, and grew up here, and for all intents and purposes are Americans. I've interviewed DreamAct students. I know dreamers. Yeah. It is a very emotional topic. For me, I'm very hard lined on immigration, except on this specific issue. And when you're talking about this sort of beta test case, it's going to be interesting to see where this goes, because even President Trump himself has indicated that he will be more lax and sort of compassionate towards dreamers.
And I think that's really important, because he's got a big job to do to deliver on some really important promises on immigration, on controlling it better, on making sure that people who've committed crimes aren't allowed to stay. Sure. And if he's going to win those arguments, he can't be hardline on the dreamers. I think that's part of getting this
some buy-in. Some buy-in.
I know that this isn't this is a legal issue, not a political one, but it's so easy in these days for those things to be muddled up.
I was going to say, Steve, I think you're spot on with that. I think the politics very much drip into the legality of this case, and we as lawyers like to think it doesn't, but of course it does, because this is really around intention, and children don't have the negative intention behind violating immigration status, and that's why we have this type of statute. So it's going to be incredibly interesting.
All right. Well, we want to save some time to talk about Steve's new show. We're outnumbered in just a moment. A big announcement for our one lucky guy today, Steve Hilton. He is launching a new show right here on Fox News Channel called The Next Revolution with Steve Hilton. Ooh. It will air Sunday nights at 9 Eastern and will focus on the populist uprisings that have upended politics from the U.S. to the U.K. Steve, congratulations.
There you go.
Tell us about it.
It's very exciting. Well, I feel like it all kind of started here. My time with Fox News, which I've absolutely loved. I've loved getting to know everyone and meeting everyone here, and this is just such a wonderful opportunity. I'm really excited to be doing it. It's going to be fun, slightly different from the West Coast. We're going to be, as you mentioned, every Sunday night, 9 o'clock, starting probably in a couple of months. We're not quite sure about that yet, but any month soon. And I think that as well as the focus on the populism that's really changing everything from Brexit and the EU last year and Donald Trump's election and elections this year. So there's a bit of a global focus, but also because we're on the West Coast, there'll be some technology in there and how our lives are being shaped by that. Lots of fun stuff.
I don't think you're going to be short on content.
I think that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's great.
So anyway,
I just want to know if you're going to dress like casual on your show. I hope so.
I hope you
I'm a vote for dressing casual. I like it,
especially on the West Coast.
Yes,
I think that's
we know that. That's very West Coast appropriate.
This is sort of your signature look, right?
Yes,
Steve?
exactly. That's how I feel comfortable, and I hope that the viewers will come along and join us when we get going.
And they get a lot of viewers in Europe, do you think, watching you?
I don't know about that. I mean, these days, people can watch all over the world, and hopefully we'll have stuff that people are interested in online that they can check out. So it's going to be fun. It's great.
All right. Well, you have an amazing background. It's amazing to have you as our one lucky guy today.
Well, it's wonderful to be here to be able to talk about it. And as I said, you just come and join us in Los Angeles whenever you're there.
Excellent. All right. Well, we will be tuning in when that show launches. Steve Hilton, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And Evan company. And Liz E. Mack, good to have you here as well. All right, we are going to keep it right here for Outnumbered Overtime on the web, and find us on Facebook at facebook.com/outnumberedfnc. We are back on TV tomorrow at noon.